자, 안녕하세요, 여러분. 이제 10시가 돼서, 그죠? 59분인데 제가 미리 시작했네요. 네, 10시가 돼서 데보션 테크 세미나를 진행하도록 하겠습니다, 여러분. 반갑습니다, 여러분. 오늘 이번 달에도 이렇게 찾아주셔서 정말 반갑습니다. 오우, 막 들어오고 있습니다. 네. 오늘 잠깐 제가 30분 전에 지금 켜놓고 영어로 이렇게 준비를 하고 있었는데 제가 영어 한마디도 못했어요. 너무 너무 오랜만이라 네. 핑계 대자면 네. 오늘 좀 재미난 세미나가 될 것 같아요. 특히 Q&A에 이제 저는 이번 할애를 많이 해서 이번 세미나에서는 아마 질문들도 많이 있고 할 것 같습니다. 오늘 이제 세미나 진행 내용 좀 잠깐 보여드리겠습니다. 네. GitHub 코파일럿 제품 데모와 로드맵 이런 주제로 일단 라이언 님을 모셨고요. 이분이 GitHub의 제품 개발 VP라고 저희 회사로 치면 그죠 임원이죠. 예. 어떻게 하다 보니까 오시게 됐습니다. 저도 지금 너무 떨리는데요. 일단 지금 오신 분들 저희 데보션 테크 세미나 늘 하던 것처럼 출석 체크를 좀 해야 되거든요. 그래서 SK 그룹 분들 외부에서 오신 분들은 상관없습니다. SK 그룹 분들은 여기 채팅창 통해서 여기 써 있죠. 예. 출석 체크하고 슬래시 이름 슬래시 소속사 슬래시 이메일 이렇게 채팅창에다가 남겨주시면 저희가 교육 시간 이수하는 데 도움이 될 것 같습니다. 네. 그래서 지금 천천히 올려주시면 될 것 같습니다, 여러분들. 네. 그리고 오늘 데보션 세미나는 줌 웹비나로 진행을 하기 때문에 이제 Q&A를 채팅창에 올려주셔도 되지만 사실 이 웹비나에 Q&A 기능이 있거든요. 벌써 누가 Q&A를 올려주셨네요. 네, 이런 식으로 Q&A 이제 기능을 이용해서 여기다 올려주시면 이따가 세미나가 끝나고 난 이후에 저희가 라이언님한테 직접 답변을 받아보실 수 있습니다. 네. 그리고 혹시나 영어가 되시는 분들은 직접 손을 딱 들고, 그죠? 손을 들고 영어로 질문을 해주신다면 제가 오늘 상품, 기념품을 또 드릴 수 있는 그런 혜택을 드리도록 하겠습니다. 그래서 용기 내셔서 질문을 한번 해보시면 좋을 것 같습니다. 여기 참석자들 발언을 하실 수 있는 시간을 드리도록 하겠습니다. 네, 너무 많이 기대됩니다. 오늘 세미나. 네, 출석 체크 지금 잘 올려주고 계시고요. 많은 분들 오시고 계십니다. 지금. 네. 자, 오늘 세미나 다시 한번 소개를 드리면요. GitHub 코파일럿 제품 데모와 로드맵이라는 주제를 가지고 일부 세션에서는 저희가 이제 오버뷰랑 간단한 데모, 그다음에 피처 디테일과 로드맵에 대해서 라이언님한테 들을 예정이고요. 요 오버뷰가 끝나고 프레젠테이션이 끝나고 나면 이제 Q&A로 45분 정도 이제 질문하는 답변하는 시간을 듣도록 하겠습니다. 지난달에 지난 5월이죠. 지난달 오늘 6월이니까 지금 지난달이죠. 지난달에 그 마이크로소프트 빌드 2022가 일어났잖아요. 이제 세미나 있었는데 그때 아마 이때 엄청난 게 문의와 이제 외부에서 이렇게 그런 내용이 있었던 것 같아요. 그래서 저희도 MS에 잘 협조를 요청해서 이렇게 좋은 자리를 마련하게 됐으니까 여러분들 많은 참여 부탁드리겠습니다. 네. 제가 오늘 이상하게 말이 자꾸 이렇게 자연스럽게 안 나오네요. 긴장했나 봐요. 미치겠다. 네. 자, 오늘 저희 질문해 주시고 참석 열심히 해주신 분들한테 제가 이 데보션 굿즈가 2022년에 새로 나왔어요. 그래서 USB 허브라고 맥북 쓰시는 분들 거의 필요하시잖아요. 그죠? 필수로 요거를 드릴 거니까 라이브에 참여하신 분들한테만 특별하게 주는 선물이니까 질문 많이 해주시고 적극적으로 참여해 주시면 감사하겠습니다. 네, 그러면 여러분들 라이언 살바님 모시도록 하겠습니다. 라이언.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the intro. And thank you all so much for inviting me to share this amazing piece of technology that we've been working on for the last couple of years. I have to say it's I've been working in developer tools for now over 20 years, and this is probably the most significant, actually life-changing technology that I've worked on in the entire 20 years. And so it's really a gift to be able to share it with you here today. So what are we going to do? What are we going to talk about today? We're going to spend our time talking entirely about GitHub Copilot. As many of you probably know, we just announced GA of Copilot last week. after a 1-year period where it was in technical preview. And believe it or not, while it was in technical preview, over 1.2 million developers were using Copilot while we were actively developing it. As we have kind of turned the corner and turned the page into general availability, we're seeing actually just a lot of great momentum, a lot of great press, a lot of great endorsements. If you aren't on Twitter or Hacker News reading about it, now's your time to see it firsthand. So just to kind of start here with a screen share for you. And it's helpful to know who you're talking to. Everyone, my name is Ryan. I'm Vice President of Product at GitHub, where my teams look over pretty much everything having to do with code productivity. So that is things like Copilot, yes, but also code spaces and repos and pull requests and code search. If you are a developer who is actively coding and you use GitHub, there's a very good chance that you work on the products that my team builds. Now, I find that there is absolutely no better way to understand how a product works than to start with an actual demo. And so before we even look back at the numbers and talk about how it works, I just want to let you see how it happens in action. And so here's what we're going to do. We're going to work with two things that I'll tell you, I personally know very, very little about. The first is Italian. I cannot speak a lick of Italian. I do not understand it at all. And so we're going to use Italian as our example. In fact, what we're going to do is we're going to use a page from Dante's Inferno in the original Italian. Now, I've got an image of, a page out of that book. What we're going to do is we are going to use the second thing that I know very little about, Python. I am not a Python developer myself. I, am, by training a little bit more of a web developer. I tend to work a lot with JavaScript and PHP and things like that. But we're going to use Python today. And then we're going to use Copilot to hopefully build an application to guide us along the path to use optical character recognition to extract the text out of the image. Then we're going to use Google Translate to translate that text from Italian to English. And then we're going to create a new image that places the original image and the translated text side by side. Again, all using Copilot to help us build the application in an unfamiliar coding language. All right, sound like fun, everyone? Hopefully it does. It should be a good time. So here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna exit now out of PowerPoint, and I'm going to drop into Visual Studio Code. Now, out of the box, Copilot works on a number of different code editors. It works in Visual Studio Code. It works in Visual Studio. It works in the entire suite of JetBrains IDEs, as well as NeoVim. So chances are, if you are a developer who's coding today, Copilot automatically works with any one of your editors. I happen to be using VS Code because it's just where I feel most comfortable. And a few things that I want to point out about this. So in order to make the demo kind of easy and tight, I've already included a couple of libraries that I'm importing. So from Pillow, I'm importing an image library, image draw, and image font, just to make it easy to kind of build out the images. I'm using a popular open source library, PyTesseract, that helps with optical character recognition. And then I'm importing Google Translate, specifically version 2. Other than that, there's really nothing else going on in this project. So let's see how Copilot can help us along the way. So I'm going to start with my first method, define get text from the image. And then I'm going to tell it get text from the image in Italian. Now notice that I am just putting in comments here. Copilot picks up context from the comments and the other code that is in the project. Now, immediately here, you'll see that Copilot has already suggested some text or some code to me. It's everything that you see here in the light gray kind of italic code. You'll also see here that as I moused over it, I got the option to use some keyboard shortcuts to cycle through different suggestions. In fact, I'm going to do just that right now, just to see what else is available to me from Copilot. All right, these look fairly similar to each other. All right, there's two major ones that were here. This looks fairly good to me, so let's just try this. A couple of, things to note here is that not only did Copilot suggest code for me, but Copilot also suggested comments to complement that code. This is one of like the crazy things that I love about Copilot, because I don't know about you, but I'm typically pretty bad about commenting my code, which makes the code often a little bit unreadable or unapproachable for the next developer to come along. And because Copilot is suggesting both comments and code at the same time, well, it's giving me kind of better quality, kind of more readable code than I would get otherwise. And let's see here. It is in fact doing that. It's using PyTesseract. So it saw that I had this library imported up above. It's importing it, and it's importing it in Italian. Okay. It's going to print the text out and return the text. All right, that's probably pretty good. So let's do the next step. I said we were going to get it via OCR, and then we were going to translate it. So let's define translate text. We'll give it some text, and we'll say translate the text from Italian to English. Let's see what it gives us. Okay. It's given us some additional code to choose from here. I'm just going to hit tab to accept this. And again, here, let's just kind of look at what it's saying here. So it's going to import the client. It's going to translate it here. You can see into English. It'll print the text out, return the results. Okay, that looks pretty good. Again, I'm not a Python developer, but like this kind of looks like reasonable, useful code. All right, so let's kind of go to our next one here. So I've done a bunch of really straightforward methods so far. Get text, translate text. Let's see if we can do something that is really unusual, really kind of complicate things. So I'm going to define juxtapose the image and the text, right? So I'm going to create a new image twice the width of the original and the same height. I'm going to place the original image on the left and text on the right. I'm going to display the text in red on a black background using roboto.ttf font. I've got a kind of an unusual font over here. And let's see, look at this. It is suggesting, what is that? Maybe about 16 lines of code here. And let's just kind of look at what it's doing here. You'll see, again, it's got a bunch of comments. It's creating a new image that is twice the width and the same height. It's using a black background. It's placed the original image on the left at the 0, 0 position. Went ahead and got that font for me. Drew the new image. Text size equals draw text size. Okay. Text position. Okay. Draw the text in red. Display the new image and return the new image. All of that looks pretty good. Again, I've got the option to choose from different suggestions. So I'm just going to cycle through and see if there's anything that's really different or better here. So these are pretty similar. I see a couple of little tiny differences, like this one's saving the image, but I don't want to save the image. I don't necessarily want to show the image. All right. So we're gonna accept this one. I don't want to just, if I just show the image, I'm not quite there yet. So we'll delete this piece. Let's see if this works. So now we're going to define process image. And oh, look at this. It suggested something for me already. It's going to process the image. And here you'll see that this is kind of interesting. It knows that I wrote these other methods up top. Get text, well, we defined that back up here, right? Translate text, same thing. We wrote it up there. Juxtapose the image and the text. New image, let's see here. Again, we don't necessarily want to show it just yet. So let's just do a return new image. See if that works for us. And then we're going to say, try it out on Dante.png. And I'm just letting it suggest things to me. No, I want to save it. Save the image. Oh, and check this out here. So it has actually said new image, save, and it's renamed it as Dante.new. Okay, all right, this is kind of cool here. So I think that we've got all that we need. Now, I don't know about y'all, but I'm a little bit nervous. I just let Copilot essentially write the entire application for me. There's a darn good chance there's a bug in this, but let's try it anyways. Let's see if it worked. So I'm going to save it, come up to my terminal here. Excuse me while I get the Zoom controls out of the way here. We're going to say Python skg.py. Oh man, I'm on the edge of my seat. I don't know if this is going to work or not. Oh, there was an error in there. There was an error. Let's see if we can see what the error was. Oh, wow. But look at this. Look at this. Hold on. So it got the Italian. Remember how we output the optical character recognition? That's pretty freaking cool. So it output the Italian. Now it translated the text. Check this out. It actually has translated all the text successfully. That looks like English to me. That much I can do. I can read English. Let's see here. And then we got a little bit further down here. And we printed out, and there was there's a type error and expected string on my font size here. Okay, so we did have an error in it, but for all of that effort, we have one bug that we need to go kind of address with our font size. Actually, I'm going to see here. I'm going to be ambitious. I'm just going to see if I can get Copilot to maybe, if I can use one of the other suggestions to get a good working bit of code out of this. Oh, oops, I hit return. My apologies. Get the width of the image twice. Display. That's an interesting one. See if I see one that might work for us here. I am not seeing one offhand. Okay, that's okay though. That's all right. We got pretty far along. I do have one. I before, just because I was, doing a little bit of rehearsal here. I went over here before and I did it with another file. Let's see if I can do this one if it still works for me. Here we'll do Python demo.py. That one actually did execute. Dante translated here. And check this out. Now this one I did in white text rather than red text. But there it is. Italian on the left with the original image, translated text on the right. And it is all pretty much, if I go to this demo.py, it's almost all the exact same code, right? All of this recommended by Copilot. Had to think very, very little about it. So that got us pretty far. Let's actually now like peel back and look at what's actually happening behind the scenes, right? So let me do a go into presentation mode here. So what's happening? How is this sorcery working? All right, well, first on our right here, we've got Visual Studio Code. All right, that's where we were at. That's how we were operating. Visual Studio Code's good. We all recognize that. It is sending context to the Copilot service. What do I mean by context? I basically mean that we take the cursor position and we look a little bit ahead and a little bit behind that cursor position and send a little snippet of code over to Copilot, because Copilot needs to know what it is that you're trying to create, what you're trying to build. Excuse me. Copilot builds suggestions based on the comments, the code, the packages around it. Then Copilot is going to send that context over to the OpenAI Codex model. This is a model that is trained on literally billions of lines of public code and natural language content. When I mean natural language content, I mean like news articles and blog posts and things like that. It is just ambient content on the web. And because Copilot is trained on all of this code and all of this natural language content, it means that if a language is represented in the public domain, there is a very good chance that Copilot knows how to suggest code for it. So whether you are using Python or JavaScript or Rust or Clojure or writing a shell script, often while it is best in English language comments, heck, if you are writing in Italian, to use the example from before, there's a very good chance that Copilot will recognize how to use it. The quality of suggestions is often dictated by the amount of training data that is in the wild. So the more a language is represented, the higher the quality of the suggestions. And for that reason, what we find is that generally speaking, Copilot is best on things like Python, JavaScript, Java, because these are the languages that there's just the most of. So like I said, Codex is trained on a bunch of public data. That then sends the suggestion back to the code editor, where, in the format of that kind of gray italic text that you saw before, where you as a developer have an opportunity to choose which suggestion best matches your intent. Now, we had Copilot for at least a year before we went to GA. And one of the most common questions that I hear is like, is it getting better? Is it learning? And definitively, we can say, yes, it absolutely is getting better. How do we know? So there's a couple of different tools that we use to measure quality of Copilot. The first one is through basic internal unit testing, right? How would you test AI? Well, check this out. Here's what we do. What we did is we took out of GitHub's own code base. That is the code that GitHub is written in. GitHub, like any other application, is, well, it's an application. There's lots of code in there. And we took methods and functions that we already had unit tests for. And what we did is we took the insides of those functions out. And instead, we let Copilot write the internals of those functions. And we ran the same unit tests against them. And we wanted to see how often can Copilot actually write, the internals of a function that pass the same unit tests that were written for a human coded function. And what you can see over time along this x-axis here is that over time, we improved. This is the success rate here along the y-axis. Over time, we improved. Not only did we improve kind of as we ran the models multiple times over it, but as Copilot learned over time, we ran the same tests again about 6 months later. Copilot got better just by learning off of essentially the suggestions that that developers were providing. And so it is progressively, definitively getting smarter over time. And in fact, the real test, from my point of view at least, the real test of is Copilot, like something that brings real value to developers, is how much code is it writing? And what we found during the preview is that over the course of that year, we went from just under 30% to now nearly 40% of code, of new code among preview participants is being written by Copilot. That means that that's 40% less keystrokes, 40% just kind of less time, writing boilerplate. This is all automation at the keyboard, at the terminal. Now, I'll fully admit, like, some of you are probably thinking, I would be thinking, well, sure, there's a lot of new code being written during a preview because people are like, they're kicking the tires, they're testing it out, they're intentionally using Copilot to see what it can do. And therefore, of course, it's going to write a lot more code. I hear you. But what we did is we performed the same analysis on developers who were using Copilot every day. These were daily users of Copilot. And I have to believe that developers weren't testing out Copilot every day, that they were actually just getting work done, right? And so we believe, even as we head into general availability, even as more and more developers integrate Copilot into their daily lives, it looks like this number is likely to hold, all right? So that's another great measure. How else do we know that Copilot is working, right? Well, we also performed a controlled experiment, a study, right? So here's what we did. We took 110 developers, all with at least 2 years of experience as a professional developer. Many of them had many more years of experience, but we wanted to make sure that we weren't just testing students or newbies. We were testing seasoned professional developers. And we asked them classic interview question: write an HTTP server, right? And these, by the way, these developers were using JavaScript. That's the language that we chose to do it in, right? So on the left here, 50% of them had Copilot. 50% of them were part of our control group and did not have Copilot. Those who had Copilot completed the task 73% of the time. Those without Copilot completed it only 59% of the time. So what that means is that developers using Copilot were more successful with the task. And that's pretty great. That's pretty cool. Like, that means developers are able to get work done and, kind of get the job done better. Now, that's part of the equation. Then we also looked at how long it took them to complete the task. It's not just a matter of like binary, yes or no, did you finish, but did you do it quickly? When there we looked at Copilot versus the control, it took less time to complete the task. On average, when using Copilot, it took only 73 minutes. Compared to the control, who did not have Copilot, it took them nearly twice that amount of time at 121 minutes. So developers are getting the job done faster when using Copilot. And when you multiply that out across the productivity of a team, right? Like think about your engineering teams and how much more successful and how much quicker they would be getting their work done. That is substantial productivity gains. Now, I am personally like excited to see the productivity gains, but like what I care about personally, what makes, me happy is making other developers happy. Like what the real measure of success for me is are developers able to create more? Are they having fun doing what they're doing? Are they able to stay in the flow? And so we also conducted a survey. And here among our technical preview customers, we asked about 15,000 of them, why Copilot? What good is this doing you? How are you getting value out of this, right? And we heard all sorts of great things, like what, just here around 80% were able to stay in the flow longer, right? Here around 60%, they're less frustrated when coding, able to focus on more satisfying work, less mental effort on repetitive tasks, nearly 90%, right? Like all of this is fantastic, but the one that just, I don't know, y'all, like the one that really stuck with me is this one here in the middle. They were more fulfilled in their job. And I don't know about you, but I cannot remember the last time that I added a tool to my stack that actually made me more satisfied with my job, with my work. It's rare that you find a tool that really changes the way that you feel when you come to work every morning, right? And that's exactly what we're seeing here. I want developers to find joy and happiness in what they're doing. And this is probably one of the first times, at least in my career, that I've seen this kind of a transformative behavior. And it shows up in Twitter quotes and on Hacker News and Reddit and elsewhere as well. Like we hear developers saying things like it removes the ceiling on creativity, that like they're able to stay in the flow longer because they don't have to jump out of their editor to go read documentation, to go find a code sample on Stack Overflow or from a tutorial somewhere or watch a video. Like what developers are able to do is express their intent, describe what they want to create, and then Copilot provides the basic framework, the basic boilerplate that they can then go and edit, and they can then kind of tweak to their heart's content, but it doesn't require them to go shift focus, shift context continuously. So all of that good stuff. So where are we going with this? What's next? What's on kind of, the roadmap here? Well, when we announced general availability last week, if you were watching closely, you probably noticed that we went into general availability only for individuals. That is to say that, you as an individual developer today would have to bring out your own credit card, right? And pay for Copilot for yourself. And we know that many organizations want to purchase Copilot for their entire team. And don't worry, we're going to get there. So we intend to release Copilot for organizations and enterprises later this calendar year. Really, our point of view is that we wanted to bring, we're GitHub. Like GitHub is really about connecting with individuals and creator communities and students. And so we wanted to bring Copilot to all of the open source developers out there and all of the students out there first, and then bring it to enterprise afterwards. So that'll come later this calendar year. Along the way, you heard me talking about model improvements when I was talking about unit testing before, and that's still happening, right? We're still getting better all the time. And so you can expect us to keep on iterating and fine-tuning our models so that Copilot gets even better at suggesting relevant content that's of higher quality, that is more secure, that is more performant, that, basically lives up to the evolving standards of developer best practices. You can also imagine the not so distant future here as well, that today Copilot is it's a cloud-based service. You have to have an internet connection. You have to have an opening to the web in order to use Copilot. But not everyone is able to operate in those environments. Sometimes you're in a low connectivity environment. Sometimes you're working on a super secret government project, or like just in a high compliance environment where you're behind a firewall. And so we're also looking at ways that we can combine local models that live on your machine with cloud-based models, so that not only are you able to operate in those more restrictive environments, but as you might imagine, when your context has to travel over the wire to a cloud-based service and you're at your keyboard, delays can, even of 50 milliseconds, can feel like a lot. And so we want to make sure that Copilot always feels snappy and responsive when you're at your keyboard. We've also, one of the real revelations for me in kind of tackling this project is that, what Copilot really is, it's a translation tool, right? Just like you might go to any service to translate from Korean to English, or from English to Italian, or from Spanish to German, I don't know, whatever language it might be. Copilot really just looks at coding languages like other human languages. And all it's really doing is translating from a natural language into a programming language. Well, why can't you do the same thing in reverse? Why can't you, for example, translate from code into natural language if, for example, you want to describe a portion of code? Or maybe, just like we can translate from Korean to English and back again, why not translate from JavaScript to Python and back again? Now, just like any other translation tool, I'm sure that for the foreseeable, for the foreseeable future, it will require some sort of human judgment on the other side of the keyboard. Someone to make a decision about, is this a good translation or not? Or can it be expressed a little bit differently or a little bit more succinctly? But when you think about if in your organization, you ever need to either summarize a bit of code, maybe when you're creating a comment for a pull request, or you maybe need to do a migration from one language to another, that kind of bootstrap of assistance could be very, very helpful. And then last, kind of on the near-term horizon at least, is really thinking about how do we improve the overall code quality of not just suggestions generated by Copilot, but even of any code written by the developer, right? And so we're really thinking here about how can we combine Copilot with other products and services in the GitHub portfolio. So you can think of, for example, here, something like GitHub Advanced Security, which analyzes code for potential vulnerabilities or for potential opportunities to maybe pick up a more recent version of a package or a dependency. And so how can we use this service that is running inside of your code editor to not only improve suggestions delivered by the service, but all of the code created by your development team? So this is kind of the near-term roadmap. I hope that you have lots of questions here at the end of this, and that I've maybe sparked your curiosity and your imagination. I'm going to maybe stop sharing here so we can turn over to a little bit of Q&A. and see what folks are thinking.
Wow, thank you very much. 와우. 이제 Q&A 세션을 좀 가질 건데요. 잠시만요. 제가 화면 공유를 하고, 어디 갔지? 와, 이 라이브 질문이 엄청 많이 올라와서 제가 그거 지금 계속 보고 있다가, 와, 시간 모자르면 어떡하지? 막 이런 생각하고 있었는데, 일단 한번 열심히 해보겠습니다. 예, 일단 저희 오늘 Q&A 세션 도와주실 마이크로소프트, 그러니까 과거에는 GitHub의 지사장님으로 계셨고 한국 지사장님 계셨고 지금 이제 마이크로소프트에 계신 마이크님을 잠깐 소개해 드릴게요. 예, 좀 잘 부탁드리겠습니다. 일단 네, 마이크님 한번 인사하시겠어요? 네, 네.
안녕하세요. 네, 제가 마이크로소프트에서 앱스 이노베이션 한국 사업을 담당하고 있는 김현석, 영어 이름 마이크입니다. 오늘 기톱 코파일럿 세미나를 준비해 주신 김상기 매니저님께 다시 한번 감사드리고요. 저희 마이크로소프트에 한 분 더 소개를 시켜드리겠습니다. 마이크로소프트에서 SK그룹을 담당하시는 어카운트 executive이신 저희 조정혜 매니저님이 같이 들어와 계십니다.
와, 이제 오늘의 본격적인 Q&A 세션을 또 해볼 텐데 이게 좀 어떻게 전달될지 모르겠어요. 근데 저희가 유튜브로 쏘고 하다 보니까 어쨌든 PPT로 제가 사전 질문을 옮겨놨어요. 여러분들이 줌에서 질문을 하시지만 화면상에 나가려면 이렇게 해야지만 이제 원활한 진행이 돼서 이렇게 진행을 하고 있고 그래서 제가 사전 질문 일단 받은 거 웹사이트 통해서 사전 질문 받은 7개의 질문 먼저 답변 질의응답 받고 그다음에 지금 라이브 질문이 벌써 18개까지 계속 올라오고 있는데 예, 24개네. 그죠? 그래서 요것들을 이제 또 다뤄볼게요. 그래서 사전 질문부터 우선 화면에 보이시는 거 위주로 제가 이제 말씀을 드리고 이거에 대해서 이제 마이크님이 통역을 좀 해주시고 이제 답변 받고 예, 답변 받은 내용은 또 간단하게 한국말로 예, 전달해 주실 수 있겠죠? 네. 그래서 시간이 조금 걸릴 수 있을 것 같지만 한번 그렇게 할게요. 아니면 그냥 영어로만 할까요?
질문,
네.
네, 질문을 영어로 제가 드리고 답변은 대부분 이제 코드, 랭귀지 뭐 이런 그 명사들이 많은 답변들이라서 충분히 들으셔도 이해가 되실 거로 보이고요.
그러면
나중에
예, 시간
제가
관계상 그렇게 하시죠.
이메일로 또 답변에 대해서 받아서 다시 말씀을 드릴 수 있도록 노력을 드리겠습니다.
네, 그럼 일단 박재규님 질문부터 한번 예, 질문해 주시고 답변 좀 부탁드릴게요. 네네네. 차례대로 이제 이거 마이크님이 하시겠어요? 그냥 진행 자체로?
네, 그냥 뭐 제가 지금 그
네.
라이언님에게 그 말씀을 드리면서 답변을 받도록 하겠습니다.
네네.
Okay, Ryan, I just send you direct chatting message. This Q&A first question for the Github Copilot. The question, ask person is name is Park JQ. He want to know an explanation. He's asking in inquiries. It follows the question. But what is the Copilot support plan for the GitHub Enterprise? And he wondered if the contents being developed while using Copilot are also transmitted and used for the learning. Also, he wondered if he can use the company's source code to fine-tuning, and if possible, he can use the company's source code for learning without opening it to the outside world. It's a general question, Ryan. Yeah.
Great question. So thank you. This is all good stuff. So there's a couple parts to that question. Let me break it down. First part, when will GitHub be available to enterprises? Talked about that one earlier, by the end of this calendar year. Second, can your team members use Copilot without the code being used or any of their activity being used to train the general model that goes out to the rest of the world? The answer to that is yes. There is an option for IT administrators. When we make GitHub for Enterprise available, there will be an option for IT administrators to essentially decline any telemetry to be sent back to the service. And so in that case, what happens is, your developer's coding, it sends context to the service. The service returns the suggestion, and then we delete everything, right? No context is retained in that case. And then the third part of the question is, can you use your organizations repositories, private repositories, in order to fine-tune the model specifically for your organization. This is a bit of a nuanced question, and it's for a couple of reasons. So, like, the simple answer is yes. We will also offer what we call custom private models. Custom private models are essentially trained on your organization's private code, and then they complement the base model. So the kind of the use cases in which you would want to do this is, let's say that you have a lot of private code with a lot of private libraries, frameworks, or APIs that just aren't exposed to the world at all. And you want to make sure that the suggestions Copilot returns include suggestions that would maybe reference back to those APIs, libraries, and patterns. I will say here, and this is where I'm going to make it a little bit more nuanced, is that the Copilot general model, the Codex model, is already very, very good at picking up API patterns, even when it hasn't been trained on those patterns, because again, it picks up local context and it understands the general shape of code. So what's really necessary here is that your organization has a sufficiently large code base on which to train that private model, and sufficiently diverse data or diverse code within that code base. And last, sufficiently unique code within that code base. That is to say, it is substantially different than what could be found on the, in the public. So if you have a large code base that is diverse and unique, custom private models will be right for you. What I would encourage most teams to do is first just see if the generic model works for you. And then, if you want to experiment with us, like, we're certainly glad to work with you to create the custom private model. Right now, I have a lot of confidence in the generic model first.
Okay, Ryan, thank you. Yeah, I just summarized to some in Korean language. Yeah.
Okay.
답변의 기술적인 내용은 어느 정도는 이해 들으셨을 것 같은데, 근본적으로는 일단 현재 GitHub Copilot이 GA가 된 것은 for personal. 그래서 개인적으로 혹은 팀에서 코페이 카드로 GitHub 홈페이지에서 결제해서 사용을 하실 수가 있는데, 약간 소규모 모델이고요. 지금 라이언님께서 말씀하신 대로 Enterprise for Organization이라는 이름으로, 그러니까 GitHub Copilot for Organization이라는 이름으로 빠르면 올해 연말, 칼렌더 이어로 올해 연말, 늦어도 내년 초에는 출시가 될 예정입니다. 그것에 대한 가격은 조금 높을 걸로 예상이 되고요. 현재는 for personal은 one month에 $10 이런 식으로 되어 있는데, 1년으로 따지면 12개월이지만 2달쯤 깎아주는 100불 정도. 근데 for organization은 한 명당 아마도 15불에서 20불 정도. 그렇게 해서 1년이면 원이어 서브스크립션으로 엔터프라이즈 기업의 라이센스로 GA가 될 예정에 있습니다. 그리고 엔터프라이즈의 경우에는 국내만 그런 게 아니고 해외에서도 온프렘 환경에서 소스 코드를 폐쇄망 안쪽에다 두고 쓰시는 경우가 많기 때문에 for organization, GitHub Copilot for organization도 그것에 맞추어서 되기는 하겠지만, 특성상 AI가 학습을 다른 것들과 같이 할지 자사 내에 있는 소스 코드만 할지는 정책적으로 결정이 되게끔 하는 식으로 나올 거라고 제가 알고 있습니다. 그래서 그 부분은 조금 더 시간이 지나면서 프로덕트 로드맵에서 나오는 대로 알려드릴 수 있으면 될 것 같습니다. 그리고 제가 기탑 직원이 아니라 이제는 마이크로소프트 직원이라서 정보의 한계가 좀 있습니다. 그리고 이제 신민호님이 주신 질문을 제가 또 라이언님에게 드리도록 하겠습니다. 이게 오늘 미리 좀 양해의 말씀을 드리면 질문이 너무 많습니다. 지금 제가 번역기로 돌려놓지 않은 9개의 Q&A 질문이 또 들어와 있는데요. 어쨌든 시간이 되는 데까지 좀 진행을 하고, 나머지들은 제가 다시 추려가지고 라이언님께 이메일로 물어보고 그 질문에 답변을 받아서 김상기 위원장님께 다시 드리도록 하겠습니다. Okay, Ryan, the second question from the Minho Sin. His organization currently using the GitHub Enterprise, his company. So it's hard to get related service or support. But this is some unclearly some support policy to the enterprise customer from the GitHub Korea side, because GitHub Enterprise generally self ticket-based asking GitHub service without the premium service, so that can be answered by me. So his question is, he think Copilot will also support GitHub Enterprise in the future. So what are the GitHub plans for the some business model? And second question is, can the Copilot learn patterns at this stage? For example, the some singleton and factory and triple D enabled patterns. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, so yes, Copilot will support GitHub Enterprise. I mean, the maybe to simplify the answer a little bit is that Copilot works on any code. It doesn't matter if that code is a loose file on your desktop, if that code is in Azure DevOps, if that code is in Bitbucket or anywhere. All that Copilot needs is the context of what's in the code editor. In terms of business model for Copilot, what we're generally looking at is a per user per month business model, and it will be an add-on to GitHub Enterprise, or even if you don't have GitHub Enterprise, let's say that you're like an Azure DevOps customer, right? You could still get GitHub Copilot as a standalone license. Totally cool, right? And then second, you asked, can Copilot learn particular patterns, architectures like MVVM or singleton or factory, right? So I guess the answer to this is yes, with a kind of an asterisk next to it, right? What Copilot does is it picks up the patterns that are around it. And so you don't necessarily, as a developer, say like only use this particular pattern, and then like you don't configure Copilot to reproduce a pattern. If the code around it is using a particular pattern, like a singleton pattern, then it will probably suggest that same singleton pattern back to you. And so this is one of those things where you have to remember that because it's machine learning, ultimately it's probabilistic what code it returns back to you. And that probability is influenced by both what you write in your comments and the code surrounding it. So it does understand coding patterns. It will repeat coding patterns, but there's no configuration to say, I only want to use X. Does that make sense?
Great. Yeah, great. Okay. 예, 상기 매니저님 다른 질문 또 올려주시겠어요? 황준호님 질문이요. 네. Okay, third question to Ryan. His name is Junho Hwang. There are a lot of code in the GitHub. He means maybe GitHub.com, and some of them is good, or some is some garbage, maybe. So the Copilot should distinguish this and provide only excellent code and good code, and want to know how GitHub Copilot distinguish this. He just knew about some technical knowledge.
Yeah, it's a good question. So first, I like where we're at today is we are not excluding any code from the model. That is to say that we do include the good, the bad, the uncertain, right? What, again, kind of getting back to the probabilistic aspects of Copilot, what we have found is that there is a lot more good code in GitHub than there is bad code. And so what Copilot tends to return is good code. But it is not all good suggestions. Like, I mean, you saw this in the demo, right? We had a bug in it. It is absolutely possible for Copilot to, suggest an error in its suggestions. The question is really, are you going faster with all of the suggestions that Copilot provides, even if you occasionally have to go back and change a line of code somewhere? So it's a mix. You still have to depend upon your developers to be, good at debugging, to, make discriminating decisions about the code they accept or don't accept. Over time, we absolutely intend to start being a little bit more discriminating about the code that both goes into our model and introducing a proxy service that does more code scanning of suggestions as it goes out to the editor. And so we believe that the quality will only improve over time. But today we're already feeling pretty confident that Copilot is of more benefit and more good than it is without it, as demonstrated by, we talked about the HTTP server experiment. That's a good example of how it's able to help developers get their work done more quickly with fewer errors.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's take some brain showers. Some of the very light questions. Someone who asked for why are you naming the Copilot? So there is some funny story in some behind some Copilot naming. So yeah, there is questions.
Yeah. So I mean, really, the tagline is your AI pair programmer, right? And so it really came from the idea that, we generally produce better code when we have someone looking over our shoulder to, help kind of code. And so Copilot, it's your buddy that's sitting by you in your chair, helping you code, even as you, as the developer, have your hands on the steering wheel. You've at least got a Copilot to kind of sit by and provide advice and suggestions and help you along the way.
Thank you. Okay, fourth question. His name is Chu Young-woo. He just wonders what is the rules Copilot recommends and how to handle the licensed codes. So there is a very frequently question for the who are very interested in Copilot, some IP issue and licensed code and GPL. So yeah, there's a question.
Yeah. So thank you, Chu. So first, thing to understand about Copilot is that Copilot isn't providing kind of a copy paste of code that is out there in public repositories. When we say that Copilot is trained on public code, what it's really doing is learning how the language works. It's learning, the syntax and the patterns in a language. And then it is synthesizing entirely new suggestions and new code based upon those patterns. And so, it's literally a transformative model rather than a repetitive model. So having said that, we recognize that especially when you have a pattern that is repeated again and again and again and again out in the public, it is possible for Copilot to even accidentally suggest code that matches or mirrors code that is in the public. And so we've put in some safeguards in order to make sure that you provide some level of protection there. Namely, we introduced a new filter at GA, where what we do is we compare suggestions from Copilot against an index of public code on GitHub. And when a suggestion matches 150 characters or more of any part of the public code, we simply do not display it. We don't even show it, right? And so you as a developer won't even know any difference, right? You just know that every suggestion you receive is guaranteed to be unique up to 150 characters, right? Or rather, excuse me, beyond 150 characters, to be more precise. Now, that's an option that you can turn on or off. You can choose to use that or not to use that. I would say here as well that, like, if you really care about IP protection, intellectual property protection, there are a lot of ways that code can get into your code base beyond Copilot. If you think that developers aren't going out there and copy pasting from Stack Overflow or from other tutorials, like, you know, that's happening. And so if you really care about intellectual property protection, you should be using a service in order to do code scanning as part of your CI/CD process. Over time, I want to work with developers to find, you know, more creative ways in order to kind of like scratch that itch, or to kind of like help developers have feel more safe. But as it is today, we really feel like we put in the maximum number of protections we can by comparing up against that index of public code, and therefore guaranteeing that any recommendation, any suggestion is unique.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Okay, the next question is name is Kim Do-hun. So his question is, I just sent you. Okay, take a read.
Yeah, I'm reading right now. So Kim, this is really kind of interesting. So I'm going to tell you a funny story, right? Or I thought it was funny, at least. So when we were first building Copilot, we were testing out different comments and seeing how, you know, the suggestions changed based upon what you wrote, right? And we found that if you would say, like, I don't know, like reverse a string, right? But then you added the word like quickly at the end, or, you know, the fastest way possible, or maybe you added, but do it securely at the end. Copilot would actually give different suggestions that were optimized for performance or security, or maybe even accessibility if it was a UX control, right? Now, since then, we've started to do what we call prompt crafting to make sure that we always bias for security and we always bias for performant fast code. But to your point, Kim, like the words that you express absolutely, pardon me, absolutely will change the suggestions in nuanced ways. What I've noticed, and we're still learning here, right? So I'm just going to give you what I've observed out in the wild, is that developers have generally started to change the way that they comment by beginning each function with some sort of more descriptive, like natural language sentences of what they are trying to create. And that tends to produce the longest suggestions that are the most helpful, right? And so also another behavior that I've noticed is that when developers get truly unexpected suggestions, like it's like weird code suggested, it often means that they have a bug somewhere else in their code, and Copilot is reading off of that prior code that has a bug in it, and they are responding to the bug rather than the intent. So long declarative comments is one nuance. And then, you know, occasionally trust Copilot and look for errors elsewhere in your code. Those are the two kinds of things that I've noticed.
Okay, great. Thank you. 다음 질문 있으실까요, 매니저님? 만들어 놓으신 이기영님 질문이요. 코파일럿에서 지원 가능한. Okay. Next question is from the Lee Ki-hyung. So, do you have a GitHub any plan to continue to increase the some number of languages available for Copilot? If you can share the some public product roadmap, and if you have any, is there anything to consider when adding it? Is the ultimate goal for the Copilot to eliminate simple calculation or code work so that it can develop creativity with some efficiency?
Yes, love it. Yeah, good question, Lee. So I kind of alluded to this earlier. Really, if code exists in the public domain today, Copilot already understands it. And so, therefore, like it so happens that actually most languages, Copilot already knows pretty well. The quality of the suggestions can vary. I completely admit that. One of the more interesting examples that we have is actually twofold, Cobalt and Fortran. Now, I don't know how much Cobalt or Fortran anyone here writes.
So many.
But say what?
So many in here, Korea.
So many. Okay, great. All right. Well, so it turns out that Cobalt and Fortran aren't particularly well represented in the public domain, or at least less representation than some other languages. And so one of the things that we're looking for, frankly, is organizations to partner with that will allow us to train Copilot on, languages like Cobalt and Fortran that is just, we have less training data to learn from. And so, certainly if anyone here wants to work with me on that, I'm ready to be your partner. And we are also continually retraining the model. Right now, the plan, we're still working on how frequently we need to retrain the general model. It's probably between every 3 to 6 months is my best guess. Because the thing is that like, we're in the software industry. Like new versions of languages are coming out all the time. New frameworks and APIs are coming out all the time. And our practices, the way that we code is even changing over time. And so you want Copilot to continually be learning from the newest, the best that we as a community have to offer. And so Copilot, you can expect it to kind of retrain between every 3 to 6 months. And over time, we'll absolutely work with anyone and everyone that we can in order to increase the diversity of data that we bring in. The last piece that Lee, you asked about there is the goal ultimately to eliminate simple calculations or code work? I think I would frame it this way. The goal is to enable developers to focus on building things rather than to focus on syntax, right? So if you can focus on the logic you're trying to write, the application you're trying to build, rather than trying to, the new thing you're trying to bring into this world, if you can focus on that rather than remembering how an API is written, like, what the particular, order of variables are and an argument, right? That is good. And by doing that, I expect that not only will we allow developers to be more creative, but we will invite more people to become developers because it will not require as much, arcane knowledge about, the nuances, the syntax of particular languages. People can just create.
Great. Okay. Next question. As Dongjun, Iri Dongjun, he knows the GitHub Copilot service automatically implements or suggestion codes of needs users. So many times when people, between the people talking about the verbally or written, there's also always in this miscommunication. So
Yep.
yeah, so he wants to know what the exact code implementation failure rate is, and he wondering how GitHub Copilot copying some incorrect code to implementation. So and also continue to training, and some GitHub Copilot success rate will increase. This is correct. Some additionally, is there's a no bug in the some auto implemented code, or if a bug is occurs, and how does the automatic code related debug take place?
Yeah. So I want to be and kind of take a firm stance on this one, I guess, which is to say that Copilot is not a substitute for debugging. It's not a substitute for unit testing. It's not a substitute for having, good test practices. And so, while we do want to, write the highest quality code possible, I don't see Copilot anytime in the near future being a substitute for just good development practices and having a good, smart developer on the other side of the keyboard. So for all of you that are engineers, don't worry, your job is safe. We will always need you, and we'll always need you to kind of be dedicated to your work. But it's I think you bring up a really, really good point there, that even we as humans, when talking to each other conversationally, sometimes miscommunicate our intent. Maybe not precise enough about our language here. And this is where I'd say, Copilot will only be as good as the developer who is wielding the tool. It's just like a carpenter with their hammer, right? If the carpenter is continually missing the nail, then the nail's never going to go into the board. So we will, over time, continuously strive to improve the model, both by training on more diverse, comprehensive data, and by introducing new, whether they're linting services or code scanning services that help to augment and check for the quality of code. I talked about it on my roadmap, right? Bringing in GitHub Advanced Security to scan the code even as the developer is writing it. But I think that there is an entire ecosystem of development tools that we have built in order to check for the quality of our code, like linters, like unit testing and integration tests, like UX testing, things like that, that will always continue to be critical parts of our tool belt, right? They're just Copilot's not a replacement for those things. It's something there to help you go faster and to take some of the labor out of coding, not to immediately make a novice into an expert developer.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. Before the move to the next question, I'd like to some intro for some Korea just customers attendees who are not familiar with the GitHub Advanced Security and Code Scanning, just in Korean explanation. 네, 지금 라이언님의 답변 중에 아까도 잠깐 한 건 언급됐는데 코드 스캐닝이라는 단어와 GitHub 어드밴스드 시큐리티라는 말씀이 섞여 있었는데요. 그거는 GitHub 엔터프라이즈라는 제품이 GitHub에서 팔고 있는 제품이고 GitHub 엔터프라이즈라는 제품과 함께 동작하는 GitHub 어드밴스드 시큐리티라고 하는 제품이 있습니다. GitHub 어드밴스드 시큐리티는 흔히 이제 지금 듣고 계시는 DevSecOps라는 마케팅 용어의 시큐리티를 담당하는 별도의 제품이고요. GitHub 어드밴스드 시큐리티의 코드 스캐닝, 토큰 스캐닝, 시크릿 스캐닝 이런 기능들을 통해서 소스 코드를 정적 코드 분석, 시장 용어로는 SAST 툴이라고 하죠. Static Analytical Source Code 이런 것들을 할 수 있는 GitHub Advanced Security의 하나의 통합, 유니파이드 플랫폼으로서 DevOps와 DevSecOps를 구현하면 그 소스 코드가 GitHub Copilot을 통해서 제시됐던 본인이 작성하신 코드시든 가져온 오픈 소스시든 거기서 코드 스캐닝을 통해서 이런 디버깅이나 이런 것들도 하실 수 있지 않을까. 이게 이제 추가적인 제품에 대한 내용이 있어서 제가 말씀을 드렸습니다. 자, 바로 지금 작성해 주셨네요, 매니저님. 제가 이거 지금 다 메모하고 여기 했는데. 오케이. Ryan, as so far, there is a pre-inquiry question, and we still have a little about some live question today's attendees. So The next
Awesome.
question is someone wants to know, does the code assistant label the quality of the code? In the case of Java, even if the Copilot try to use the Lambda and stream is, he just want to keep the presenting simple repetitions.
Yeah, so there is no evaluation or visible, like, I don't know, ranking, I guess, of quality of code. This is one of the reasons why you saw me kind of iterate through multiple suggestions, looking for different ones. This is one of the reasons why we added that feature, is because sometimes a suggestion may not be exactly what you're looking for. It may not be, it may have an obvious bug in it. It may be kind of a quirky implementation. And so, Copilot's there to help you go faster, but not necessarily to eliminate any bugs. And it will, like, completely. I've seen Copilot, by the way, suggest some really kooky stuff. Like occasionally, it can be bizarre code, right? And that's just kind of one of those things where, at least as a developer, I kind of see it and I laugh. I sometimes take a screenshot of it and share it with my friends, but like, you just kind of move on. You move on.
Yeah, me too. Sharing the Instagram.
Yeah, good.
Okay. The next question is he using maybe a beta tester for the Copilot and using the Python. So far, it has been smooth to use the only short sentence he think, but will it possible to use code in the long sentence or multiple lines in the futures?
Yeah, so I'm interested. Excuse me. I'm interested in this developer's experience just because, as you saw in my demo, like Copilot can suggest 15, 20 lines at a time. Sometimes it does only one line at a time. It is a little bit variable. I will say, I'll give like anecdotal evidence. This is just my personal observation has been that Copilot tends to suggest shorter, or tends to provide shorter suggestions, one-line suggestions, when there's not a lot of surrounding code or context. The more code there is, the longer the suggestions tend to be. And when you provide, again, comments that describe a big thing that you want to do, like define a method and then give a comment saying what you want to do, that's when you tend to get longer suggestions. If you're just typing, writing code, and you're writing code one line at a time, it's great about completing that line. But if you're not using comments to describe your intent, then Copilot has a hard time, being verbose, right? Mike, you're on mute there, my friend.
So, sorry. Next question is a security area. Due to some security issues, the port used by Copilot is openly not open some proxy port. So he thinks it will be solved if Copilot supports the proxy. He's so curious about what is the support plan in the future for the open support for the proxy area for the security matters.
This could mean a couple of things. I want to make sure I'm answering the right question. Is it really concern that because Copilot is sending context, that is to say code from your local file to a proxy service, that means it is traveling over the wire and therefore potentially at risk? Is that the concern?
Yep.
Okay, great. So it's
no, sorry. It's an opposite.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, opposite. The proxy support product planning for in the futures. Open the proxy support to some specific proxy port.
I'm trying to think of what this would be that this person's concern. So wanting to send to a proxy service like through a particular port.
particular port. Yeah.
You know what? Honestly, so I'm guessing here is the issue. Is the port used by Copilot is often not open. It's their firewall. Got it. Okay. Yeah. So basically, they're behind a firewall. They can't open that port in order to communicate with the Copilot service, and therefore Copilot doesn't work. Got it. So yes, that's on our radar. That is on our roadmap. I can't promise a date on that one. Probably early next year is my guess. Like one of the challenges that we have on that one, and boy, this is getting into inside technical details a little bit, but as you might imagine, Copilot runs inside of Azure. And one of the things that we need to work with on Azure is essentially the network routing that it goes through to different regions where our infrastructure is hosted. And so we just have a little bit of work to do with Azure, what's called Azure Front Door, in order to create a kind of a reliable IP address and port to open, so that organizations with a tight lockdown firewall can be precise about it rather than it being dynamic.
Yeah. Okay. And also, especially Azure is more usable. Okay. The next question is someone who wants to write a package for the Copilot. Have some similar open source or so package things. Yeah.
A package. So a package in this case could mean a few things. So one thing that I hear commonly, just want to test if this is the right thing, is that a developer might want to use Copilot in an editor that is not on our supported list. Like, for example, I don't know, RStudio or Sublime Text, right? And they want to use Copilot in a different code editor. Is that the question?
Yep.
Yes. So we will offer an API. Again, I don't necessarily have a timeline on that. My guess is it'll probably be next calendar year before we provide an API. Our estimate is that by supporting VS Code, Visual Studio, NeoVim, and JetBrains, we're probably capturing maybe 80 or more % of the market. When we provide an API, it'll actually be the exact same API that our current supported editors are using. And we really just need to commercialize a little bit and kind of implement things like, I don't know, make it a little bit friendlier to use and implement rate throttling. But next calendar year.
Okay. And also one of the some live questions. Some of attendees want to know is how many developers for some R&D for the GitHub Copilot team under your organization?
Oh my gosh. I almost want people to guess. If anyone wants to put a guess in the chat window, you are welcome to guess in the chat window. It's smaller than you think. So the Copilot team is about 25 people.
Okay, great.
It's very tiny, very tiny.
Yeah, because very rare DevOps you use now. So yeah. DevOps is a key thing for some automation and some efficiency.
Yeah, we are small but mighty. There are now, I will admit here that we are certainly augmented by some very smart people on the OpenAI side of things and on the Azure side of things. Like with any product, it takes a community, takes a village. But the whole product, we have 2 product managers and about 25 engineers, some of whom are working on the model. We have a few people who are working on our extensions, and then a few people who work on the basically the service itself. So you can do a lot of things with some good engineers.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Okay, next question is you wonder is Copilot has accuracy annotating or the rules of annotating when presenting the code sequence, and he wondered how much he should write the developer's intentions.
Has the accuracy of annotating or rules of annotating when presenting the code sequence. So I'm going to do my best to answer this one, if I may. So there's a couple of things that are happening here. So should write the developer's intention first. There's no particular minimum in terms of amount of code that you need to write in order for, or even comments that you need to write for Copilot to produce a suggestion. I mean, I have seen Copilot present a suggestion with as little as 1 character. Now, it wasn't a very good suggestion, but like, it will provide a suggestion with as little as 1 character. What really matters is, how much is necessary in order to get a good quality suggestion, in order to get something that's going to be useful to you. And in general here, I would say that you can, with a short comment of 3 to 5 words, you can often get a pretty reasonable suggestion. One thing that we are really investing our research time in today, as you saw earlier, Copilot can provide multiple suggestions given a particular context. Usually it will provide anywhere between 2 and 5 suggestions given a particular context. We are investing heavily today in sorting and ranking those suggestions based upon our best guess of the developer's intent. And, it's just like in a search engine, right? Someone puts in a 1 or 2 word query into Bing or Google or wherever, and you get a sorted and ranked kind of version based upon past, users who have searched on similar types of things. And this is where we actually see a lot of the improvements in suggestion quality happening over time, that we're able to get, the more people use Copilot, the smarter our sorting and ranking algorithms get. So the short answer is there's no minimum. 1 character is enough. Usually when developers are using it today, 3 to 5 words will give you a generally good quality suggestion, and it's going to get better over time the more people who use it.
Okay, and some general question in next. Someone think about the Copilot completely replace their job, developers. What capabilities do we need to survive as a developers? There's so many questions the same.
Yeah. So, I would say like here, first, nobody worry about your jobs. You're all going to be fine. It's going to be great. As we saw in my demo, Copilot can still introduce bugs. We will always need someone smart to go fix those bugs. We will always need someone to kind of make good judgment calls about what is good code versus bad code. Having said that, you're right. Your job will, your patterns and your practices will change over time. I think, probably one of the first things that I've seen among developers who've used Copilot for a long time now is that they use comments more frequently, right? They use comments to declare intent. And then, you start to become a little bit more of a curator of code suggestions than you do a first or primary author for a lot of code. And this is much of the same way that, back when I started coding, well, a long time ago now, pretty much everything had to begin with me, writing code. After a little while, there were more and more examples and documentation and tutorials online. Then a lot of my coding was figuring out where to go to find information about code, and then, translating that into my use case. The next evolution of this will be now you can stay in your code editor in order to get the same information, the same boilerplate, the same examples that make you more productive. And so, what I really expect is that we as developers are going to start focusing more on architecture. We're going to start focusing on the bigger patterns that we're creating rather than on the individual syntax. That's the shift that I see happening over time.
Okay, and okay, for Korean questions in our general chatting window, there is I can answer it in Korean. Just to take a breath, Ryan. SI 사업 특성상 고객사는 개발자가 사용하는 ID에 돈을 투자하지 않습니다. 서버 DB에 투자해도 개인적으로는 유료 사업을 전개할 경우 개발자 개인보다는 라이센스식으로 팔아야 하겠습니다. 질문은 아니셨군요. 예, 이게 포 오르가니제이션이라는 제품이 나오면 조금 윤곽이 들어갈 것 같습니다. 그 말씀드리고 싶고, 그 다음에 여러 질문들이 있었는데요. 그 또 조금 중복되는 성격의 질문들이 있어서 조금 제가 좀 스킵을 하는 것들이 있고, 이 마지막 지금 슬라이드에 있는 마지막 질문을 또 하도록 하겠습니다. 오케이, Ryan. Are there any restrictions on the specific framework or library support? He just was surprised to see that some Tesseract support works well, but he curious about the category of the application, such as recommending annotation when developing the Java Spring.
There's no particular restrictions or limitations. Again, if the code exists in the public domain, then there is a very good chance that Copilot understands the patterns of that particular API or library or framework. The places where we see that Copilot is maybe just the suggestions aren't as high of quality, or they're not as long, or maybe they don't come as frequently, would be if, let's say that it is a library or a framework that is nowhere in the public domain. It only exists in private code. In those cases, Copilot is less helpful, but that doesn't mean it's not helpful. Primarily because Copilot, again, it's picking up context from the code around it. And if that API is used or referenced elsewhere in your project, there's a non-zero chance that Copilot will pick up the patterns of that API. Not as well as if there were thousands of examples of it that it was picking up from the public domain. And this is where, again, where custom private models become really, really helpful if you're a large enterprise that has libraries, APIs, frameworks that are kept in your internal repositories.
Thank you, Ryan. I think this is last questions, because so many questions are some duplicate these previous questions, some kind of the intellectual properties and some for organization versions, license GA when they are there, and some library, and some main question is what is the currently supported languages? They are not including the Java, he thinks. So when is the plan for some supporting Java or some supported language scheduled for the roadmap?
Yeah. So again, everything, if it's in the public domain, it's supported today. So you would be only the most obscure languages are unsupported today. It is even Clojure, which again is not a very popular language, is supported by Copilot today. I've seen Copilot used for Rust. I've seen it for Go. I've seen it for Java. I've seen it for R. I've seen it used for SQL. I've used it for even I think this is cool. Even things that are not coding languages, but are like declarative config as code, right? Something like Terraform, right? Or maybe even if you're on GitHub and you're using GitHub Actions and YAML for actions, I've seen Copilot be excellent as a tool for assistive config and infrastructure as code. So there's a good chance that if you give it a try, you'll have success. And by the way, if you find a language that it doesn't work for, please get in contact with us. We want to know about it so that we can go and build up the training data in partnership so that it does get added. But my belief is that today you'll probably be pleasantly surprised.
And yeah, so and also one of some Korean questions I can answer the 한국어 Korean language supporting. 그래서 한국어 지원이 지금 됩니다. 혹시 유튜브 찾아보시면 한국어 함수 구문 같은 것들 한국어로 쓰셔서 코드 추천 받는 거를 보실 수 있으십니다. Okay, real final question, Ryan.
Right.
generated code with the Copilot, and he wondered if the possible recognize that possible to generate the code with the pattern using the specific library or framework, natural language. Yeah.
So the best, I would say, give it a try on this one. Like what I would probably do if I were trying to get Copilot to behave this way or to provide the right suggestion is I would in a comment say, create a class, create a singleton class for a, whatever you want that class to do. And there's a good chance that Copilot will do it. Again, it's because Copilot is probabilistic. It's based upon, recognizing patterns. It doesn't behave the same way where you give it instructions and it always does the same thing. It will depend upon what is around it. And if you are really explicit about what you want it to do, Copilot is generally pretty good about following your instructions.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. Yeah, you are a very strong man. It's a whole evening night. Okay, thank you. Yeah, this is all questions. Okay.
Y'all been great. Thank you. Thank you so much.
대부분의 질문은 처리가 된 것 같습니다.
네. 질문이 많고 좀 중복되는 질문도 있는데 제가 이걸 어떻게 쳐야 되나 막 따라하기 힘들었네요. 오늘 질문 많이 해주셔서 진짜 감사하고 이거 정리를 다 일단 해놨으니까 제가 일단 마이크로소프트 쪽에 이제 넘겨드려서 좀 답변을 또 받을 수 있는 것들은 받아서 여러분들한테 공유 드리고 오늘 발표 자료도 데보션에 이제 올려드리도록 하겠습니다. 여러분 지금 식사하셔야 되는데 그죠? 보통 11시 40분, 30분 되면 다들 밥 먹으러 가잖아요. 계속 참여하고 계세요. 거의 100명 넘게 지금 처음에 들어왔던 인원에서 그렇게 많이 안 빠지고 있는 게 질문하는 게 너무 재밌는 것 같아요. 이게 왔다 갔다 하는 게 그죠? 그래서 아마 요 질문을 통해서 대부분 많이 궁금했던 점을 해소하셨을 것 같아요. 그래서 오늘 너무 뜻깊은 자리였던 것 같고 제가 잠깐 안내 말씀을 좀 드릴게요. 오늘 이렇게 너무 질문 많이 해주시고 사전 질문 해주신 분들 제가 선물을 이렇게 다 드리고 싶지만 한정이 되어 있어서 오늘 오후 2시까지만 이제 이메일로 오늘 참여하셨던 분들, 지금 라이브 신청하시는 분들한테 혜택을 드리기 위한 거거든요. 그래서 라이브 참석하셔서 질문하셨던 분들만 이메일로 저에게 회신을 주시면 2시까지만 제가 상품을 드리도록 하겠습니다. 아까 서두에 말씀드린 상품을 보내드리도록 하겠습니다. 그래서 이메일로 연락을 주시면 될 것 같고요. 참고적으로 오늘 마지막 인사드리면서 저희 데보션 사이트 광고 하나 드릴게요. 저희 이제 외부에서 오신 분들 같은 경우에 인재DB 등록을 받고 있습니다. 그래서 사이트의 메뉴를 통해서 좀 인재DB 등록을 해주시고요. 데보션 사이트에 가입 많이 해주시고 가입을 하시면 이제 이런 알림이나 이런 세미나에 대한 홍보 같은 것들을 받을 수가 있고요. 그리고 블로그를 거의 매일 올리고 있거든요. 저희가 그래서 블로그도 많이 안내 받으실 수 있으니까 꼭 가입해 주시고 이 가입하는 것들도 지금 TID로 하고 있지만 아마 7월 달부터는 SNS 로그인을 통해서 모든 사람을 다 가입할 수 있게 개선이 될 예정이니까 많이 이제 가입해 주시면 감사하겠습니다. 예, 여러분들 오늘 다시 한번 마이크로소프트 두 분과 그다음에 여기 GitHub VP 라이언님한테 인사 말씀드리면서 오늘 세미나는 이것으로 마치도록 하겠습니다. 여러분 감사합니다.
제가 뭐 라이언한테 또 말씀드리겠습니다. 오늘
네네.
매니저님 그 시간 만들어주시고 기회 만들어주셔서 감사드리고요. GitHub 코파일럿을 통해서 마이크로소프트 애저의 차별성에 대해서 한번 좀 인식되셨으면 하는 기회가 되길 바람하지 않고 또 텔레콤, 원스톱, 플래닛, 하이닉스 여러 개발하시는 분들도 이제 애저에 대해서 조금 더 한번 알아보실 수 있는 기회가 되셨으면 하고요. 또 데보션에 대한 디벨로퍼 커뮤니티에 대해서 저희 마이크로소프트도 저라도 어떻게 같이 인커리지 할 수 있는지 방안을 좀 한번 찾아볼 수 있도록 하겠습니다. Ryan, thank you for today. You are so angel. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you all.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Please,
so much fun.
Yeah, please share today's your slide for the GitHub Copilot. This is really new one. We will share in this community for the some SK customers. Thank you, Ryan.
Terrific. All right. Be well, y'all. Have a very good day.
You too.
예, 다시 한번
고맙습니다.
감사드리고요. 네, 저기 가볍게 이렇게 인사 나누시면 채팅방 통해서 나가시면 될 것 같습니다. 여러분 감사합니다. 제가 녹화는 이제 중지하겠습니다.